When I first walked into the office, the weight of expectation pressed against me harder than the briefcase in my hand. It wasn't just another job, it was the beginning of a career I wasn't sure I was ready for. Everyone seemed older, more polished, more certain of their place here. Everyone, except me. And then there was her. My boss. 42, composed, confident, with the kind of elegance that didn't shout but quietly commanded attention. She carried herself like she had weathered storms and still managed to stand tall. Her presence filled the room before she even spoke, and when she finally did, her voice had this calm steadiness, the kind that could silence a crowd without raising a single note. She called me into her office on my very first morning. The space was orderly, warm, touched with personal details, a framed painting of a garden, a small stack of well-read books, a vase of fresh flowers that somehow matched the quiet authority she carried. She gestured toward the chair across from her desk, and I sat, trying not to fumble with the file in my hand. She looked over my work, scanning quickly, eyes sharp but not unkind. "You've got potential," she said finally, "but you're rushing." Her fingers tapped lightly against the margin of the page, not scolding, just steady. Then she lifted her gaze, meeting mine. "Slow down. Think about why you're writing it, not just how fast you can finish it." I nodded, words caught somewhere between my chest and throat. And then, just a small thing, her hand rested on the page near where mine had been. The closeness startled me. My skin didn't even touch hers, but it felt as though the air between us tightened, pulling me into awareness. For a second, I forgot the weight of the office, the deadlines, the title of boss. For a second, she was simply a woman across the desk, warm eyes softening as she waited for my reply. I managed a quiet, "Yes, I understand." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Not patronizing, not distant, but something else, something almost approving. And just like that, she returned to her composed rhythm, setting the file aside, giving me instructions for the week. But as I left her office, I carried more than her words. I carried the memory of that brief pause, the way her gaze had lingered, the subtle warmth in her smile. It wasn't anything, not really. Not yet. But it was enough to plant a spark I couldn't quite ignore. The office was unusually quiet that evening. Most of the staff had already packed their bags and slipped into the fading light, leaving only the low hum of air conditioning and the soft rhythm of rain tapping against the windows. I stayed behind, determined to make a good impression, though truthfully, half my motivation was the thought of her still being there. Her office door was open, the glow of a desk lamp spilling into the hallway. I caught a glimpse of her, leaning back in her chair, shoes set neatly on the floor beside her, bare feet tucked lightly under her as she studied a file. It was a side of her I hadn't seen before. Not the untouchable professional in tailored heels, but a woman at ease, shoulders relaxed, a faint crease of tiredness at her brow. She noticed me as I passed. "Still here?" she asked, voice low but carrying warmth that softened the formality of the day. "Trying to finish this report," I admitted, lifting the folder in my hand. "Come in," she said. "It's easier not to do these things alone." I stepped inside, setting my papers across from her. The quiet stretched between us, not uncomfortable, but weighted. She closed her folder, studying me with an expression that wasn't managerial, wasn't critical, it was simply curious. "So," she began, resting her chin lightly on her hand, "what do you want out of this job?" "Out of life, really?" The question caught me off guard. I hesitated, staring at the scattered rain sliding down her office window. "I don't know yet," I confessed. "I think I'm just trying to find where I belong." For a moment, silence hung, and then she nodded, almost wistfully. "When I was your age, I thought I had it all mapped out. A straight line to success. But life doesn't care for straight lines. It bends you, tests you, sometimes breaks you." She gave a small, almost rueful laugh. I wish someone had told me that. Her honesty startled me. She wasn't giving advice from a pedestal, wasn't rehearsing some polished story. She was sharing a piece of herself, a fragment of vulnerability I didn't expect. "I think that's what makes you different," I said quietly. "You don't just lead, you understand." Her eyes softened, lingering on mine longer than necessary. She didn't reply right away, but in that silence, I felt a shift. The line between boss and employee blurred, not erased, but thinner now. When I left her office that night, the rain had stopped, but something inside me had only just begun. The next afternoon, I found myself in her office again, this time hunched over the draft of a presentation that I couldn't quite get right. Words blurred on the page, the structure felt forced, and my frustration showed in every scribble of my notes. She stood behind me, silent at first, watching. Then she spoke softly, "You're overthinking. Let me show you." Her chair slid closer, the leather creaking faintly as she leaned in. I felt the warmth of her presence before I saw her face beside mine, close enough that a strand of her dark hair brushed my shoulder. She reached for the pen in my hand, her fingers brushing lightly against mine as she guided the marker to the page. "Start here," she murmured, her voice calm, steady. Her hand rested just above mine, not heavy, just enough that I could feel the weight of her skin through the smallest contact. My chest tightened, not from nerves about the project, but from the unexpected intimacy of the moment. I tried to focus on the page, but every detail of her was impossible to ignore, the faint scent of her perfume, subtle and clean, the warmth radiating from her arm against mine, the way her sleeve brushed softly over my wrist as she wrote. When she finally pulled back, she turned slightly, and that's when our eyes met. For a second, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, if anything, it was charged. My breath slowed, and I swear the room itself seemed to narrow, holding only the two of us within its walls. She blinked, a faint smile curving her lips as though she'd caught herself. "See," she said lightly, her professional tone returning. "It works better when you keep it simple." I nodded, though I could hardly process her words. My thoughts had drifted far from the presentation. As she gathered her notes, I caught myself still staring. The way her fingers smoothed the edge of the paper, the way her eyes flickered briefly toward mine before she turned away. It was nothing, it was everything. I forced myself to speak, if only to break the intensity. "Thank you," I said quietly. She paused at the door, glancing back at me. "Don't thank me yet. There's still work to be done." Her words were firm, but the softness in her gaze lingered. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about lessons in work. Something else was unfolding, quietly, unspoken, between us. The dinner was meant to be routine, a gathering with clients, a chance to make connections, to prove I could hold my own in a room full of professionals who'd been doing this far longer than I had. I wore my best suit, tried to mimic confidence, but the weight of my youth sat heavy on my shoulders. She was there, of course. My boss. Draped in a dark, elegant dress that carried authority without effort. When she entered the restaurant, conversation seemed to bend toward her presence. She greeted the room with ease, her voice low, her smile subtle but disarming. I sat beside her, close enough to hear the warmth in her laugh when a colleague made a tired joke about the kid at the table. My cheeks burned, the glass of water trembling slightly in my hand. Before I could fumble a reply, she spoke, calm, steady, protective. "Experience isn't measured in years," she said, her eyes sweeping the table. "Sometimes it's measured in perspective, in courage, in the willingness to learn." The laughter died quickly, replaced by an awkward silence, then polite nods. She glanced at me afterward, her expression unreadable, but her defense left a quiet mark inside me. She hadn't needed to say it, but she had. Later, as the evening wound down and the others drifted into taxis and rideshares, we found ourselves walking side by side beneath the cool night air. The city lights shimmered against the wet pavement from an earlier rain, and the faint hum of traffic filled the pauses between us. I shoved my hands into my pockets, unsure of what to say. She carried herself with the same composure as always, yet in the quiet, she seemed softer, less guarded. Then it happened, small, almost insignificant. Our hands brushed. Skin against skin, quick and fleeting. I thought she might pull away. I almost did. But neither of us moved. For a heartbeat too long, the touch lingered in the space between us, a simple accident that didn't quite feel accidental. I glanced at her, searching her face for meaning. She didn't look at me, but I noticed the faintest curve of her lips, the slightest shift in her breath. The world around us kept moving, cars passing, people laughing in the distance, but that moment belonged only to us. It was nothing anyone else would notice. Nothing that could be spoken. Yet it carried the weight of everything we were both trying, and failing, not to say. The office felt different that night. Rain streaked down the tall windows, blurring the glow of the city outside, while the hum of the lights overhead filled the silence between us. Everyone else had long gone home, but I stayed, maybe for the work, maybe because I knew she was still here. She sat at her desk, papers spread before her in neat lines, though I could tell her focus wasn't entirely on them. When I hesitated at her door, she looked up, and something in her expression softened. "Still working?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost weary. "Trying," I admitted, holding up the half-finished draft in my hand. Then, before I could think better of it, I added, "I just don't know why you trust me with more than the others do. I'm new, untested." Her gaze lingered on me, the kind that felt like it saw past the words into something deeper. Slowly, she set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. "Do you really want to know?" I nodded. "You remind me of who I used to be," she said, her voice carrying a weight I hadn't heard before. "Hungry, restless, willing to care about things most people overlook. When I see that, I can't help but believe in it." The word struck me harder than I expected. I swallowed, unsure if it was courage or recklessness that made me step closer. The air between us tightened, filled with the steady rhythm of rain against glass. Her eyes followed me as I moved, and for the first time, I saw something vulnerable in them, a flicker beneath her calm, professional surface. She reached out, almost hesitantly, and her fingers brushed against my wrist. It wasn't a commanding gesture, not the touch of a boss giving direction. It was gentle, deliberate, as though she was testing the line we had both danced around for weeks. The warmth of her skin spread through me, small and grounding, yet powerful enough to leave my breath unsteady. "You care more than you realize," she said softly. "That's rare. Don't lose it." Her hand lingered just long enough to blur every boundary I thought I understood. I wanted to speak, to thank her, to confess something I wasn't ready to name, but the words tangled in my throat. When she finally drew her hand back, the space between us felt heavier than before. Nothing explicit had been said, but the truth was undeniable. In that single touch, she had crossed from mentor into something far more dangerous, and far more irresistible. Her invitation came casually, almost offhand. "Why don't we finish the review at my place? It'll be quieter." She said it like it was nothing, like it was only practical. Yet my chest tightened the moment the words left her lips. Later that evening, I stood at her doorway, file in hand, pulse steady but loud in my ears. She welcomed me in with a soft smile, her home warm and understated. Shelves of books lined one wall, photographs of family tucked neatly into frames, a faint trace of music drifting from a speaker in the corner. The space felt lived in, personal, a glimpse of the world she never showed at the office. She poured 2 glasses of wine, setting one beside me as we spread the documents across her coffee table. At first, we worked, or at least tried to. She leaned close to point out a line, her sleeve brushing mine, the scent of her perfume subtle in the air. I wrote notes, though my focus kept slipping. Every time her hand moved near mine, every time her eyes lingered a fraction too long, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Eventually, the papers lay forgotten. She sat back against the sofa, cradling her glass, her gaze tracing the window where night pressed against the glass. "It's strange," she said softly. "I never thought I'd let someone in here. This side of me. I keep it separate." Her honesty disarmed me. "Why now?" I asked before I could stop myself. She turned her face toward mine, eyes steady. "Because you've earned it. Because you make me remember what trust feels like." I didn't know how to reply. My throat tightened, words slipping away. And then, she reached out. Her hand cupped my cheek with a tenderness that nearly undid me. Her thumb brushed lightly against my skin, and my breath faltered. "You're too young to know," she whispered, her voice a blend of warning and something softer. "But let me show you how trust feels." Her lips pressed gently to my forehead, not rushed, not demanding, but deliberate, a gesture filled with weight. My eyes closed instinctively, and in that brief contact, the world narrowed to warmth, to the steadiness of her touch, to the quiet intimacy of being seen. When she pulled back, neither of us spoke. The silence was enough. We both knew something had shifted. Whatever this was, it could no longer return to what it had been. The morning after felt strangely quiet, though the office buzzed with its usual rhythm. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, voices carried across cubicles, but for me, every sound seemed distant, muffled, as if I were listening through water. When I finally saw her, standing by her office door with a file tucked against her side, my chest tightened. She was back in her armor, heels, tailored suit, hair pinned with the same precision as always. To anyone else, she was the same unshakable leader she'd always been. But I knew different now. I had seen the softer edges, the quiet shadows, the woman behind the role. Our eyes met for only a second in the hallway. It was nothing anyone else would notice. But in that second, something passed between us, unspoken recognition, steady and grounding. My heart steadied with it, even as the weight of everything unsaid pressed deeper into me. Hours later, she asked me to step into her office. I did, shutting the door gently behind me. The silence inside felt different than it had yesterday. Not heavy, not uncertain, but full of something warmer. She sat at her desk, looking at me with a steadiness that made my breath catch. "We need to be careful," she said softly. Her voice carried no regret, only honesty. "This, whatever it is, it can't be rushed. Do you understand?" I nodded, though the lump in my throat made it difficult to speak. "I do." She leaned forward slightly, her hand resting on the desk between us. For a moment, hesitation flickered across her features, then dissolved. She reached across the space, laying her hand gently over mine. The warmth of her touch spread instantly, anchoring me in a way words never could. "This is not about rules, or appearances," she continued. "It's about something real. And real things, they take time." I closed my fingers lightly around hers, the simple contact enough to send a quiet surge of calm through me. No grand declarations, no dramatic confessions, just the truth, resting quietly in the space between us. She gave a faint smile, softer than any I had seen from her in the office. "We'll take it slow." And in that moment, I understood. We weren't racing towards something reckless. We were stepping carefully into something fragile, something worth protecting. When I left her office, the world outside hadn't changed. But inside, I knew everything had.